4:12 a.m. In the shadow of Washington, D.C.'s concrete maze of government buildings, a security camera captured the same man. It recorded every single morning. James T. That was all the ID card said. No last name, no title, no background. Just janitorial staff and a worn-out badge. When he entered through the service door, the building was still asleep. Gray fluorescent lights hadn't yet flickered on. Hallways were dim, echoing stillness like it was built into the concrete walls. And James walked through them without a sound. He pushed a beat-up cleaning cart, mop in one hand. But if you watched closely, you'd see his walk wasn't ordinary. Every step was measured to the centimeter. Every turn was geometrically precise, like he had memorized the architectural plans. He always kept his cart close to the right wall. His eyes scanned for reflections, shadows, subtle signals. Because he wasn't just cleaning, he was scanning the building. At exactly 4:17, he reached the second floor. Routine. He wiped the same overhead lamp, mopped under the same chair, dropped exactly 3 disinfectant drops in the same sink, and tapped it once with a sponge, never more. It looked like muscle memory. But in truth, every motion was surveillance. Each morning, James created a silent situation report of the building. To everyone else, consultants, junior staffers, security guards, he was just a quiet old janitor. Some didn't even know his name. No one remembered him speaking. He just nodded and walked by. But he knew everything. Which door opened how many times a week? Which employee forgot a log out? Who called whom and at what time? He didn't tell anyone. He didn't report. He just saw, and when needed, remembered. But he was never the first to speak. One morning, something strange happened. A shadow slipped through the front door at 3:54 a.m. The system didn't trigger an alarm, but James noticed. At 3:55, he entered the building, but this time his routine changed slightly. He left his cart on a lower floor, slowed down in the hallway, moved beyond his usual cleaning zone. Anyone who knew his routine would have raised an eyebrow. At one point, a camera showed him crouching by an old archive door, not to pick something up, but to plant something, a tiny passive magnetic sensor. It was against protocol. But James didn't follow protocol, because when protocol was written, he was already there, while the security team was just heating their coffee machine. James had already made it to the roof, used his own key, one not found in any system, just a soft metallic click, and the door opened. The room was pitch black. Only one faint red directional light glowed. James stood still, then slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out an old red light audio recorder. Click. He started recording. Didn't speak, just recorded the silence. Because of James, sound wasn't only words. Even the vibration in the air told a story. Minutes later, a guard downstairs screamed. Someone had tried to enter the system's room. All cameras were offline, except for one, a tiny lens inside a mop cart. And that lens caught the intruder. James didn't interfere, didn't say a word. But when the man tried to escape, he tripped over the abandoned cleaning cart. He fell, got caught. When the building's top security officers reviewed the footage, only one question remained. Who set up the system? There was no answer in the logs. But everyone knew James T. wasn't part of the system. He was the system. 8:03 a.m. The building buzzed with its usual weekday rhythm. Security guards were sipping tea. Consultants carried coffee cups. But in the system's room, there was tension in the air. The breach from last night was being logged. Avery Rains, 27 years old, cybersecurity specialist from the NSA, temporarily assigned to this federal facility. Just 3 days into the assignment. But as he read the overnight reports, something immediately stood out. Intruder detected by passive sensor. Alarm systems did not activate. Passive sensors? There were no such devices in the official security infrastructure. Avery dug deeper. He reviewed the logs, floor access records, and video footage. And then he saw it. A cleaning cart, seemingly ordinary, but tucked beneath the mop, a barely visible lens. Professional eyes would notice. That piece didn't belong to the cart. It was installed intentionally. Avery's eyes widened. This was an accident. He checked who accessed that floor during the incident. James T. Confused, Avery searched the building's personnel database. James had no listed background, no date of birth, no emergency contact. Just one line, background restricted. Contact Department of Defense for inquiries. Avery blinked. That was rare. He turned to the IT team for clues. That badge he uses, it doesn't log into our digital system, Avery said. Because it's one of the old master keys, replied a senior technician. Pre-2001. Some of those were coded during special clearance programs. We don't really know what those meant, only that they still work. That was it. James wasn't a ghost. He was something older, darker, and deeply embedded. Avery searched further, through open web, deep web, darknet. Nothing but an obscure archive thread from 2009 on a forgotten intelligence forum called Black Runners. He found this post. I met a guy named James during Project Obsidian. Never talked. Knew everything. Only thing he ever said to me was, to disappear, first you have to stand at the center. Username, the Void 7. Avery wrote that down. His stomach tightened. This wasn't myth. It was real. 2:43 a.m. the following night, James was back inside the building, walking silently as always, but something had changed. For the first time in years, he looked into a mirror. A small bathroom mirror reflected his weathered face. He didn't look broken, just tired. He pulled a folded photograph from his inner pocket. Faded edges. 3 men, one in the middle, younger James. The others, faces scratched out, except for one name. "Kay, no." James lowered his head, whispered, "I thought we buried you." Outside, down the street from the facility, a figure moved through the dark. No cameras picked him up. No sensors reacted. Only the streetlights flickered for a moment, revealing a silhouette. Kano was here, back in the security room. Avery wasn't sleeping. He combed through network activity, and then he saw it, a ghost signature, an access ping logged under a non-existent user. K _ a single block of code attached. Python, copy, edit, if target.active equals true, execute erase _ protocol. Confirm, ghost at offline. Avery's heart skipped. That's a kill script, and the target is James. Upstairs, James slowed his steps. Stop, pressed his fingers to the wall. The air felt different. The silence wrong. Someone was close, very close. And James knew it wasn't an intruder. It was a relic, just like him. Nevada desert, 2003, hours before sunrise. The desert was not just silent. It was hollow, a kind of emptiness that pressed against your ribs. The wind moved slowly, brushing against dry thorn bushes and tangled perimeter wires that no one had repaired in years. Even the stars above seemed to be holding their breath. And at the edge of the old tarmac stood a man, James, mid-40s. His boots were planted with the posture of someone trained, but not parading, clean-shaven, eyes that didn't scan, they listened. He wore no insignia, no stripes, no sidearm, not even a name tag. But inside this forgotten military compound, no one dared ask him who he was, because they already knew he wasn't here to follow orders. He was here to erase them. Project Obsidian was one of those operations that didn't officially exist, and yet somehow everyone whispered about it. They clean up the kind of mess that leaves no headlines. You don't see Obsidian agents coming, but you notice what's suddenly gone. They don't just eliminate people. They eliminate presence, memory, history. That night, James leaned silently against the corrugated steel wall of an old hangar. Above him, the security lights flickered, not broken, just reluctant. At his feet sat a small utility bag, weather-worn canvas, no visible markings. He unzipped it calmly and pulled out what looked like a janitor's mop handle. But at the end was a polished metallic node, sleek, silent, and humming faintly. It was a high-frequency vibration scanner. able to pick up voices through layers of concrete and steel. He pressed it gently to the hangar wall. No expression on his face, just the breathing of a man whose pulse had learned to stay flat. Inside, 5 voices whispered, foreign accents, encrypted language. One of them coughed, the kind of cough that hinted of nerves. James didn't flinch. He listened and recorded, but that recording would never be sent, would never be backed up, would never reach Langley or Fort Meade, because his job was not to gather intel. His job was to make sure intel could never become a liability. His job was to delete the past before the present could corrupt it. Back in the present, Washington, D.C., Avery Rain sat in a secure lab, lit only by the glow of a dozen terminals. His eyes were dry from sleepless obsession. He had been digging, hacking archives, bypassing protocol walls, crawling through the forgotten digital catacombs of defense servers. He found nothing. No social security number, no VA benefits, no listed next of kin, no home address, no digital shadow, until one single file, a grainy black and white surveillance snapshot dated 2006, a man refueling a tanker truck in the Nevada desert. The face was unmistakable. James. The file tag read, Project Obsidian operational log redacted. Avery's hand hovered over the open button. He clicked. The screen went black. And then, you do not have the clearance for this file. Continued access attempts will be logged and monitored. Avery leaned back, chilled to the spine. This wasn't just sensitive. This was forgotten on purpose. Later that night, James stood alone once again, but this time on the rooftop of the federal building. Same silence, same city lights flickering below. But something had changed. A red LED blinked in the corner of the rooftop, a beacon only he noticed. He reached into the inner lining of his coat, pulled out a small, rusted metal badge. Bent, faded, but still legible. A black triangle. No serial number. No country. No flag. Only 3 engraved words. Observe. Record. Erase. He gripped the badge tightly. Not with nostalgia, but with resolution. He looked out over the city. Below him, thousands of lives unfolded. People hurrying to work, unaware of what had been built beneath their freedoms. Unaware of the ghost that had bled to keep it invisible. He whispered to the wind, if the system's awake again, the shadows will start speaking. Then he flipped the badge around, pressed a hidden switch. Click. The red light on the roof dimmed to black, and James vanished once more into the machinery of silence. Somewhere deep underground. No windows, no clocks, only the low, constant hum of electricity vibrating through metal walls. The kind of sound that gets under your skin when you've been down there long enough. The kind of sound that makes you forget whether you're alive or just still functioning. Kano stood in front of an aging steel console. Dust danced in the stale air like time itself refusing to settle. His skin was pale, almost translucent, from years of living beneath fluorescent lights. Muscles still lean, but not from exercise. From discipline. His eyes were fixed on the screen. Cold, sharp, unfeeling, like someone who had spent years deleting his own humanity one file at a time. And then, a notification blinked to life. A code not seen in decades. Code 919, Obsidian Ghost active. Location, Washington, D.C., Federal Facility 014. His posture didn't change, but something in the air shifted. He tilted his head. The ghost wasn't him. Not anymore. It was James. K. Null stepped back from the screen, very slowly. No panic, no surprise, just calculation, like a machine realizing another machine had reactivated itself. He walked down a hallway of concrete and steel. His boots made no sound. He passed old doors with warning signs in 5 languages, none of them English. Some were locked, others were welded shut. Every one of them had been part of something the world no longer remembered, something he helped make forget. He entered a small chamber. Inside, Shelves of black folders, thin, worn, unmarked. He opened one. Inside, an old photograph. 3 men standing on a desert tarmac. 2 faces scratched out. 1 face untouched. James. Kano stared at it for a long time. "You were supposed to disappear," he whispered. Meanwhile, above ground, James walked the familiar corridors of Facility 014. Same route, same timing. But tonight, everything felt heavier. The lights hummed a little too loud. The walls felt a little too close. The air pressed, and like it remembered something he didn't want to. He passed by a mirror in one of the unused break rooms. Stopped. He looked. Not a glance. Not a reflex. A real, deliberate look, as if seeing himself for the first time in years. The man in the glass looked back with tired eyes. Not defeated. Not broken. But worn in a way that comes from carrying stories no one else will ever hear. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a photograph. Old, folded, soft from years of being touched but never shared. 3 men, young, uniformed, purpose burning in their eyes. 2 faces were blacked out with ink. Only 1 name remained. K. No. James stared at it. "I thought we buried you," he said under his breath. Outside, a shadow moved across a quiet suburban street. No camera turned. No motion detector clicked. Even the neighborhood dogs stayed asleep. Only a single street lamp flickered, and in its brief glow, a shape, a coat, a step, a figure who wasn't there when you looked again. Kano was coming. Back inside in the system's room, Avery Rains was still awake. 3 coffees deep, pale light from a dozen monitors, reflecting off his glasses. He had spent the last 72 hours trying to unbury what someone had worked decades to keep hidden. And then, suddenly, he saw something impossible. A digital echo, a ghost entry, a presence with no user, no access credentials, no device ID. The screen stuttered. Someone else was in the system, but this wasn't hacking. It was infiltration of a higher order, as if the system wanted to let him in. And the pattern of it, the signature, it was old, it was familiar, it was obsidian. Back on the lower floors, James walked slower now, not out of fear, but because he could feel the shift in pressure. He ran his fingers along the wall, not for support, but to read the concrete. He paused at corners, tilted his head, listened for the small changes in airflow, the hum of electrical tension. Then he stopped. No motion, no sound, but the air itself had changed. Someone was here, not a guard, not a thief, a relic, like him. And then, as if on cue, the lights went out. No warning, no system alert, just darkness, except for one thing. A soft red glow flickering from the emergency backup lights. It painted the walls with the color of blood. The corridor looked like a battlefield frozen in time. James stepped back calmly, into shadow, into silence, and waited. The system had spoken. The ghosts had heard it. Now one of them had come to erase the other. The hallway pulsed with red emergency light, a slow, rhythmic flicker, like a heartbeat. Everything it touched was drowned in crimson. The walls, the floor, even the dust in the air seemed to bleed. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant with history. Every inch of that corridor had once been clean, ordered, well-lit. Now it looked like a memory gasping for its last breath. James stood still, one shoulder against the cool metal wall, breathing slow, deliberate, his hand wrapped around the grip of a sidearm he hadn't touched in nearly 10 years, but whose weight still fit his palm like it never left. He hadn't come down here to fight, but he knew that sometimes the shadows you leave behind eventually come to collect. Footsteps, echoing, sharp, not the sound of someone lost, but someone who belonged to the silence. Measured, controlled. Keno, he appeared like a phantom, from the far end of the hallway, emerging between 2 columns of flickering light. Same coat, same expressionless face, but now years older. Still deadly. He didn't raise a weapon. He raised a voice. "I didn't come to kill you, James. I came to silence you." James didn't blink, didn't move, just let out a quiet exhale through his nose. Not annoyance, not fear, but the sound of someone done being quiet for someone else's cause. I've been silent for 20 years. You think showing up now makes you the voice of order? You're still loyal to a system that erased your face from its memory. But I'm not its servant anymore. I'm its witness. There was a pause, a long one. Kano took a few more steps forward. From his coat, he pulled out a small black USB, no bigger than a finger. It glinted faintly under the red lights, engraved in blood-red letters, void/red. This holds every file you ever created, every erased report, every silent kill, every op you buried. If this ever goes public, your silence becomes a war crime. James's fingers twitched, not toward his weapon, toward memory. He bent down slowly, laid the pistol gently on the ground, its barrel pointing away. A gesture, a message, then leaned back against the wall again. Calm, anchored. You don't get it, do you? I didn't stay quiet because they told me to. I stayed quiet because I refused to become like you. An echo of someone else's fear. Kano's eyes narrowed, almost human for a second. Then he stepped forward, and this time pulled a blade from his side. Long, matte black. The kind of knife made not to be seen, not to be heard, just to end. Then let me finish what they started. James didn't move. He reached into his coat, pulled out something else. Not a weapon, a badge, bent, old. The metal dulled from decades of friction. It bore a simple black triangle. No rank, no ID, only 3 words, etched with surgical precision. Observe, record, erase. He held it up toward the red blinking light above them. A camera tucked in the corner of the ceiling. Analog, still functioning. Because James had designed it that way. He looked directly into the lens. I didn't break protocol, he said softly. I was a protocol. Elsewhere, in the security room, Avery slammed his fist against the desk. Every digital feed was down. Encrypted doors were locked. Firewalls hijacked. But one analog feed remained. A line originally installed for fire drill compliance. Still transmitting. And through it, he heard James's voice. Silence used to be survival. Now it's submission. Avery leaned forward, tears forming in his eyes. He's not just trying to survive this. He's trying to end it. Back in the hallway, the lights flickered harder. A soft, high-pitched whine buzzed in the distance, the system groaning under internal conflict. Then, a sharp movement, a rush of air, and stillness. No shot, no scream, just the sound of a body hitting the floor. Quietly, a moment later, a figure walked into the light. Only one. Slow, calm steps. The USB no longer in Kano's hand. Avery gasped. He knew what that meant. James had won. Without a shot, without a scream, without a headline. Just dignity. Moments later, James stepped into the old electrical room. No cameras here. Only memory. He opened a wall panel hidden behind an old breaker box. Carefully slid the USB inside. Secured it in a hollow metal case he had welded years ago, not for secrecy, but for timing. He turned once to the analog camera mounted above the door. This story won't end with me, he said, because truth doesn't need a voice. It just needs someone to see it. And then he shut the panel. The light dimmed, and James disappeared into the heartbeat of the system once more. 3 days later, morning in Washington, D.C. Rain glazed the sidewalks like glass. Gray skies hung low, as if the city itself was grieving something it didn't know it had lost. People rushed past one another in coats and umbrellas, but the world still felt slowed, as if time had inhaled and hadn't yet decided to exhale. In a cramped apartment above a quiet corner diner, Avery Rain sat hunched over a wooden table. The coffee next to him had gone cold. The blinds were shut. The only sound in the room was the low hum of a forgotten refrigerator. On the table, a single black USB drive, the duplicate James had left behind. Avery hadn't touched it in 3 days. Not because he was afraid of what was on it, but because he knew once it was opened, it would never be able to be closed again. Not in memory, not in conscience. He stared at it like someone staring at a sealed envelope with the name of a dead, loved one inside. The truth was a weight, and he was finally ready to carry it. He booted up an old laptop, not his NSA issue, not anything connected to the outside world, just a dusty, isolated machine he used in college, before the clearances, before the oaths. No internet, no logs, no fingerprints. The screen flickered to life. He inserted the USB. Inside, dozens of field reports, with no letterhead and no sign-offs. Photographs of unnamed men, some mid-operation, some mid-collapse. Audio files labeled only by coordinates and military time. Entire documents covered in black bars, except for handwritten notes in the margin, James's handwriting. There were no grand revelations, no global conspiracies, just small horrors, hundreds of them. The kind of truths that governments deny not because they're too big, but because they're too familiar. The things done for the greater good, that rot in the dark the moment the good is gone. James had kept it all, not to use it, but to remember what it had cost. That afternoon, Avery typed his resignation email. No dramatic wording, no whistleblower statement, just a final sentence. There are systems more dangerous than the ones we build, the ones we never question. And with one key press, he signed out of a life he had once believed in. That night, in the stillness of early morning hours, he logged into a platform no one at Langley or the Pentagon monitored. freedomframe.archive. He created a blank upload. No title, no folder structure, just raw files, raw memories, truth unprocessed. Before pressing publish, he paused, then typed one line. He didn't want to be seen, but he needed to be remembered, and clicked upload. Somewhere else in the city, James walked through the rear service exit of the building for the last time. Same coat, same steps, same old leather bag, weathered and heavy, not with gear, but with memory. He didn't pause, didn't look back, but when he reached the alley's end, he turned his head toward the corner camera. He didn't smile, didn't salute, didn't wave, just nodded and vanished into the fog. The next morning, his employee records were gone. His ID card inactive, his locker empty, his name scrubbed, not reassigned, not transferred, erased, like he was never there. But one thing remained. Every person who ever worked with him remembered him with the same word: respect. 1 year later, the Nevada desert was silent. At an old airstrip buried beneath dust and wind, a rusted hangar door now bore fresh black paint, the kind that fades slowly but was made to last. It read, "Silence is duty for some. Remembering is duty for all." No initials, no signature. But to those who once knew the name James, this was louder than any memorial. It was a message, a vow, a final protocol. Maybe you met someone like him, someone who doesn't take up space, but somehow makes the space feel safer just by being in it. The one who opens a building in the dark before dawn. The one who stays when the lights are off, fixing what others don't even notice is broken. A janitor, a driver, a night guard, a maintenance man. The kind of person no one looks at twice until everything breaks down and he's the only one still standing. He didn't wear medals. He didn't tell stories. But he had more war in him than most soldiers. And more peace, too. He didn't vanish because he failed. He vanished because he finished what he started. Quietly, thoroughly, with honor no one clapped for. If you've known someone like that, someone who held the world together in silence, who sacrificed without a ceremony, who stood tall when it was easier to disappear, then you know heroes aren't loud. They don't need stages. They don't need hashtags. They just need someone to remember. So if you've ever known a man like that, say his name. Say it in your mind. Say it in the comments. Say it to your children. Because stories like his don't end in headlines. They end in whispers, passed from one life to the next, not for applause, but for truth. Say his name, because some stories only survive when we carry them. And today, this one became yours.